Today I'm going to be talking about backwards or mirror image writing and why children do it. So a few children in their music class have been doing this horizontal mirror image writing and have had some concerns from parents as to why this is, and so I decided to do some research into why children write backwards. Here's Alice's first writing of her name, where she wrote it in mirror image. She then got another piece of paper at a later stage and wrote her name in the conventional format. With these and other examples in mind, I began my research. It was thought that hand dominance had to do with backwards writing. However, that's not necessarily the case, as Mariano Sigman, a neuroscientist, explains the phenomenon in his book, The Secret Life of the Mind, How Your Brain Thinks, Feels, Decides. He believes that sometimes learning is losing prior knowledge, that part of the process of learning implies uprooting a predisposition. Learning to write in our Western alphabet is one of the incidences when some of our prior knowledge must be unlearned, deconstructed, in order to construct a new understanding. At Small World, much of our pedagogy is based on the constructivist approach to learning. This approach is based around the idea that children learn through process and experience rather than by receiving knowledge. They make meaning for themselves by engaging, doing, exploring, and socializing. Like Sigmund, I believe that part of constructing new knowledge is the deconstructing and rebuilding of previous knowledge. In terms of mirror writing, Sigmund explains the following. The visual system, our visual system, converts light and shadows into objects. But since objects turn and rotate, the visual system is not very interested in their orientation or directionality. Almost the only exception to this rule are certain cultural inventions, like letters. Our visual system has to actively ignore differences in order to identify that all the rotations, reflections, and shifts of an object are still the same object. Take this mug as an example. When we see it from the top, the side, or the other side, or the bottom, our brain must make a connection that says that all of these angles are seeing the same thing, a mug. The reason Sigmund says for backwards writing of words and letters is that children are using the same visual system as they would use the visual system for all other things, like mug, to decode letters and words. Sigmund says that the one important thing of learning to write is unlearning the property that the reflection of an object corresponds to the same object, like with the mug. Once they've experienced and explored words like their name, they will be able to deconstruct their understanding of what they are seeing and will be able to apply their new knowledge to the way our Western alphabet works and write their names in the conventional format. With all this in mind, I began setting out provocations with mirrors and symmetry. This allowed the children to begin to understand mirror image on their own terms, through their own experimentation and exploration. This supports our constructivist approach here at Small World. In one of our rings, we looked at 3D polystyrene letters in a mirror with a particular focus on B and D. We looked at how they look different in the mirror but are in fact constructed of one piece of polystyrene. Once they have realized that one letter can look like a B, D, or P, depending on which way around we look at it, they are more likely to be able to decode these letters in text and be able to remember which letter is associated with which sound. Teaching children to write our formalized alphabet is not just about speaking to them, but rather about encouraging them to translate what they know into their own language or way of thinking. Part of this process is horizontal mirroring. Think of learning as extending a knowledge wall. One cannot simply add the new knowledge abutting the old knowledge, or the wall will simply collapse. One must deconstruct some of the old wall and finger joint it into the new wall to make a secure connection that will last. So it is with learning to write. With this in mind, the children must first understand how mirror image works and mix this with their knowledge of directionality as understood through the brain's visual process. Only once they have made this construction can they deconstruct their wall in order to place the new and seemingly contrary knowledge of letters to it. So how can we as parents and teachers help our children to learn to write in the correct and conventional format? Well, the first thing we can do is to not correct our children when they do write in mirror writing, but rather to show them, by possibly using a mirror, how their name can be seen in the conventional format. You can also help them by writing their name for them in the top left-hand corner of the page, from left to right, with an uppercase first letter and lowercase letters after that. The big thing is to let them experiment with writing, because in letting them experiment, we are letting them build and construct their own knowledge of how writing works. Thank you for listening. Good night.